Act one is the beginning. I like to say that it's the mental realm, okay, the intellectual realm, where you're first deciding who are you, what do you want, why do you want it. In a screenplay, you usually find out within the first 2 minutes, who is the character, and what do they want. Why do they want it? That's part of character development. You find that out as the story goes on. So we're starting out in this Act 1, and the entire hero's journey process is about emerging from unconscious incompetence into conscious incompetence, where you're starting to know what you didn't know and you know nothing about it. And then that goes on to conscious competence. And then finally, then you learn, some degree of mastery, which is what's called unconscious competence. And that's what this entire hero's journey is about. So Act 1 is the mental realm. It's it's kind of like the transference between unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. And the first phase is something that I call origins. And Joseph Campbell will call this the call to adventure. When I present this presentation, I'm also going to have worksheets that have quotes from The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which will quote Joseph Campbell's work, and also some questions to help you put this information into the future. But what happens in this first part of the adventure is you find out who are you, what do you want, and why do you want it. And we have an activity we're going to do to help explore that in a moment. But I want you to go back to your headline exercise and pick out 1 year where you started something, where it was the beginning of something that maybe turned into a lifelong adventure. So I have my notes here. For me, that number one was Okay, so for me, that number one was in 1991 when when I first started theater for the first time. That was a lifelong passion for me. So that is that moment for me. And now I want you to think about the story that you picked, from the movie or the book. And I want you to pick out a moment where you start to find out who this person is, who this protagonist is, what they want, why they want it. So in The Wizard of Oz, of course, this is Dorothy, and the song "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" kind of encapsulates or encapsulates. Is that the word? Anyway, it kind of demonstrates that moment where you're finding out who she is and what she wants. She wants to get away from her life in Kansas. She wants to go somewhere over the rainbow. She wants to be someplace safe, where she and her dog Toto can just be. So it's that moment in the farm in Kansas which represents the origin moment for Dorothy. For Star Wars, we're finding out about Luke Skywalker, on the desert in Tatooine, and he's he wants to be a pilot. He wants to be a fighter pilot. He wants to get off that farm and do something of significance with his life. So we find out who he is and what he wants. In Harry Potter, there's the entire opening in the movie part of it where he's at the Dursleys' house, and he doesn't even know he's a wizard, but he's not in a safe place. He's raised basically as an orphan, and he's completely unaware of this whole other world that exists that he is a part of. And that's really kind of the call to adventure for him is when this big giant Hagrid, knocks on the door, bursts in and say, guess what? You're a wizard, dude. You have a choice. You can stay here, or you can, be a part of this world that you were born into. So this is the call to adventure. That is true in the story, and that is true for you. The archetype for the call to adventure is the number one. It's a very yang energy. It's creative. It's straightforward. It's represented by a straight line. The number one represents that call to adventure. And if you had listened to the first presentation that I had given, The Most Meaningful Conversation, we did an exercise called the In My World repetition. And this is really where the the creativity starts to come out, where we start to find out who you are, what do you want, why do you want it. So, yeah, you know what? This was not planned, but I'm going to say let's do that exercise and explore those 3 questions. So this is where I also ask you to get out your recording device and record yourself doing this exercise. So let's explore that first question. You're going to talk for a full minute. If you want to really get into this, go for a full 2 or 3 minutes. But make sure you record yourself so that you can listen to yourself later. But you're going to begin every sentence with "I am." Okay, so we're going to explore the question, who am I? Every sentence starts with "I am." Don't censor yourself. Talk completely through it. If you have to pause for a moment, don't pause too long. It's okay to say, nonverbals. It's okay to just go, if you don't know what to say. It's okay to say, I don't know what to say next, or, I am someone who does not know what to say next. It's okay to do that. So I'll go ahead and do that for the first minute here, and just to demonstrate so that you can do that as well. So I'm going to start at 32 minutes in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I am a guy doing a podcast right now. I am a man who is expressing himself through his passion. I am a man with headphones right now. I am a man who is admiring the sound of his own voice. I am a man who is creative. I am a man who keeps saying I am a man for some reason. I am a spirit. I am a spirit that has something to do here in this world. I am creative. I am on the verge of a paradigm shift. I am loving. I am someone who wants to reach out to others. I am someone who wants to connect with others. I am someone who has a lot to teach, and I am someone who has a lot to be taught. I am someone who wants to learn. I am someone who has a passion about learning. I am someone who is willing to take action with his knowledge to make something happen. I am a man who likes to create. I am a man who likes to repeat himself. I am a man who doesn't seem to stop to take a breath. I am a man who has done this activity. So yeah, that felt good. That felt really good. Yeah, so what came out for me during that is that I just want to initiate, that I want to start the conversation. That's what this whole thing is about, is starting the conversation. I don't have all the answers. I have a good idea about what I'm here to do, but I am someone who really wants to connect and listen to what other people have to say in this exercise. So I'm going to ask you to pause the recording and do that exercise on your own and listen to yourself. If you choose to do this with someone else, this is a great opportunity for one person to talk and one person to listen. The person who is listening, reflect back to your partner what you heard during that activity, why it resonated, and have a meaningful conversation about that. So go ahead and pause the recording and do that. Okay, so then now that you're back, and you have a good idea about who you are, and you've had a chance to explore that. And by the way, what you said today is going to change completely after another week, after another 2 weeks, after another year. It's okay. Accept the change, embrace the change. So we're going to do that again. This time we're going to say, I want. Okay, so instead of, I am, the next repetition is around the beginning of I want. Okay, so I'm going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I just want to have a blast doing this presentation. I want to make sure I'm not worried about getting all the content in, and just really kind of feel the flow and the joy of what this whole thing is about. I want to be able to just to have fun, and to say what I need to say, and I want to be heard. I want the safe space to be heard. I want to listen to you. I want to be able to stop talking and just provide the space to listen to you. I want there to be synergy. I want there to be an opportunity for all of us to get together soon, and to kind of really find a way to synergize all these ideas. I want to stop looking at the clock because I just want to get immersed in this activity. Yeah, I want to create theater. I want to create material that people can interact with. I want more interactivity. I want relationships, and I'm over time there, so that's great. So yeah, what came out for me there is that I want to stop planning and I want to start experiencing. That's what came through most of all for me. So go ahead, pause the recording. Your turn. If you haven't done that already, go ahead and pause, and then we'll come back and we'll do the final part of this exercise. Okay, so the final part of this is why. And again, I'm just doing this off the top of my head. This is literally an improv. I don't have this type of repetition exercise planned out. I did in the first one, the most meaningful conversation presentation, but this one, we're going to explore the question why. Okay, so let's see here. How do we do this in a repetition asking why? Let's try a repetition asking all why questions. Let's see how that goes. I have no idea how that's going to go, but let's just say this is all about creativity. It's all about, really exploring yourself. Again, I will stress, make sure you're recording yourself as you do this. So, all these ideas are going to come out, and the best ideas come out when you're kind of working through discomfort and you're not quite working completely in the conscious realm. You're kind of getting the unconscious out. So I'm going to start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, why am I here? Why is this work so important to me? What do I want others to feel while they're listening to this? How can I slow this down and let the clock run out? What is most important to you? What are you most passionate about? What are the most powerful questions you might consider exploring? Why don't I just go on for another few seconds even though I'm already out of time? What is your favorite story? What kind of year are you having? How close do you feel like you are to achieving what you want? Do you know what you want? Okay, that's good. That's over a minute, so we'll stop there. But yeah. So take a moment. Please pause this, and by the way, please do not feel you have to go through all of this material in one sitting. I'm going to be here for 2 hours doing this, but take this one activity at a time. There's nine opportunities like this that we're going through. But so that was Origins. So let me make sure I got through everything I wanted to say in my notes there. So we talked about the call to adventure. We talked about who am I, what do I want, why do I want it. We talked about the year that you were exploring. I'm going to actually cross it off my list here. So we went through that. Okay, so as we go through Act 1, this mental realm, the second part of the 21st Century Hero's Journey, and again, I will emphasize that this is completely my own motif. It's loosely based on Campbell. It's loosely based on all of this, but, kind of doing my own thing with this to explore archetypes and numerology as well as mythology. But the second one is what I call the shadows. Campbell will call this the refusal of the call. So this is where you have an opportunity to kind of say no. And normally if you say no, an antagonist, man versus another character, or man versus nature, or man versus fate, whatever embodies that conflict, that antagonist will come into your life. And I call that the shadow, based on the archetype of the shadow, as Carl Jung would articulate. So in the 3 stories that we're using as an example here, obviously in The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West shows up. She's Miss Gulch. I think that's her name, Miss Gulch in the scene in Kansas. But this shadow figure, kind of shows up to kind of be an agitator, to urge you on. So Dorothy has to find a way to get out of Oz, and on her tail the entire time is the Wicked Witch of the West. She represents that shadow figure. The Star Wars, we see the shadow figure in the first scene on that ship. We start to see Darth Vader. He's in pursuit of these plans, and he's after the plans, and he traps the ship, and he imprisons Princess Leia. And you find out you got a pretty badass MFer, in the beginning of that story. So he represents that shadow figure, that that artificial intelligence, that archetype of that which is kind of detached from the emotional body and is all in the mental realm there. So that's a pretty powerful thing, that shadow. And of course, in Harry Potter, you find out within the first half hour of the movie, and in the whole series of the books, it's all about this dark wizard Voldemort, who wants to kill Harry for reasons that are not even revealed until much later in the series. But you find out that he's this dark wizard that achieved great things. Terrible but great things, and represents the powers of the subconscious, the powers of evil, the powers of these negative emotions that kind of create the catalyst for change, create the catalyst for for the light to shine in the dark. So I want you to think about all of that, and I want you to go back to your headlines list here and pick out a year that kind of represented that for you. And for me, that's very easy to to kind of pick out. For me, that was my 1999, and that's where the gentleman who directed the touring company kind of put a mirror in front of my face and said, "You know what? You have no business doing this." And that was a big shadow that I'm still getting over. I can pretend to believe that I'm all the way through that ego. That's what it represents, is the ego too. The shadow is the ego. As much as I'd like to pretend that I've transcended that and I'm this evolved human being, it's still something that always comes into my mind. Do I have any business doing this? Do I have any business saying or articulating or emoting anything at all? Do I have any business going up against the establishment? I don't mean to be against the establishment, but by virtue of the psychology that I'm sharing, I kind of put myself against the establishment because of that. So so my 1999 was the representation of the shadow in that case. So we're going to do an activity now. Before I do that, I want to also emphasize the number 2. So the number 2 is the numerical archetype of this shadow phase. So the 2, is the equal and opposite reaction to whatever your intention is. There's the resistance. It represents cooperation and balance. So it's the reaction that comes from the action of setting out to do something. And that's the first hurdle, because, if you hit something hard, it's going to hit you harder back. And then you have to make the decision to push forward or to stop. And, that first encounter with the shadow is really, the shocking one. We're going to explore number 6 later on, what I call the belly of the whale, or the dark night, which is more of a prolonged experience. But that first encounter with the shadow was pretty shocking. So there's an activity, an improv game that I like to play called What Happens Next. Normally, if you're with a partner, you tell a story, and they can play along with you. And if they like where the story is going, they'll just ask what happens next, and you tell the next sentence of the story. If they want you to change it, they'll say, no, you didn't do that, or no, that didn't happen, and you have to change it off the fly. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that on your own. If you're doing that with a partner, feel free to do it the way I just described it, but I'll kind of demonstrate how that works here, so that you can start to understand conflict. You can start to understand how to work with that shadow and blend with that shadow by embracing the unknown. So so the first time through you do this is just you're telling a story, and you get a coin, you flip a coin. If it comes up heads, the answer is what happens next. If it comes up tails, it is no, that didn't happen, or No, change your story. Figure it out. Make a fresh choice. Okay. So let's see. I'm looking around my room here. I have my child's toys here. So I got a baby rattle here with a bumblebee on it. So I'll start with that. Once upon a time, there was a bumblebee, and it comes up. And I'm going to do this for a minute. No, that didn't happen. Okay, it wasn't a bumblebee. It was an elephant. Okay, flip the coin, and no, it wasn't. It wasn't that. Okay, so let's figure something else out. It was a goose. It was a swan, actually. It was a beautiful swan. And then it just came up heads. What happens next? That swan used to be an ugly duckling. What happens next? He had a very rough life as an ugly duckling, but he learned through the hero's journey how to become a swan. No, that didn't happen. He learned through walking on coals how to become a swan. He took a Tony Robbins workshop. What happens next? Those coals still have an imprint on his foot. No, that didn't happen. Those coals are still stuck between his toes even to this day. Quite a feat considering swans don't normally have toes. Webbed feet or something. What happens next? Okay, so anyway, that was a minute. Feel free to do that for 2 or 3 minutes. I know that sounds like a crazy thing, but what it does is it just kind of gets your creative mind working, how to think around problems. So, just go ahead and do that. Pause the recording and engage in that activity. We're at 47 minutes right now, so we're right on time. Okay, so now that you've warmed up, we're going to do this exercise again. And this time, you're going to set it to your own life. All right. If you want to, you can go back to the year that, you can go back to the year and confront whatever it was that was, that was giving you a hard time at that time. I guess I'll do that. I'm not going to waste too much time on this. It's not wasting time, but anyway, I'm going to spend another minute, kind of starting to confront my 1999. And you can also use this to kind of project ahead into the future, like, I want to make this class. What happens next? I got in front of my camera. What happens next? I started turning on my microphone. No, you didn't. I had to try to figure out how to turn on my microphone by turning on my computer. What happens? Whatever it is for you. But that's how you put yourself into the future. But I think it's very, very valuable to go back to the year that you had a shadow. And let's see how the story goes this time. So I'm going to go back to 1999 here, and I'm just going to spend a minute doing this. I would encourage you to do this for 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever time you need, but I'm on a little bit of a time budget here just for this one. So we're going to start now. Okay, so in 1992, I auditioned for a touring company. What happens next? I did not get cast, and I was given a lot of harsh feedback. What happens next? I was told that I have no business being around theater. No, I was not told that. What I was told was that it was completely inappropriate for me to have anything to do with that theater company. What happens next? I got angry. I blew up in my own apartment after that phone call, and I hit a lot of stuff. No, you didn't. I learned how to be funny, and I channeled that anger into comedy. I did a whole comedy sketch about it, about how failure is the way to be funny. All right, I went way over a minute, but this is fun for me. No, you didn't. I'm not funny. I did not make up a comedy sketch about it because there's nothing funny about it. Okay, so anyway, that's the idea, and I did a very brief, very poor example of it, but you're going to do much better at it when you practice this, and that is how you confront the shadow using improv skills. All right. So we're going into 50 minutes here, and we talked about the number 2, we talked about shadows, we talked about the refusal of the call. And we're going to go into the final part of Act 1, which is the mental realm, which is going from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. And this is where we go into what I call the Phase 3 helping hands. And this is also called supernatural aid, or the meeting of the mentor, as Joseph Campbell would describe it. And this is where you meet your friends. You are given talismans, or you're given objects of powerful, of power, objects with powerful properties, to help you along your journey. So for the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy meets Glinda, the Good Witch, who gives her the ruby red slippers, which turns out to be the answer to everything at the end after you go through this emotional journey. She had the power to go back to Kansas the entire time. Also, along the yellow brick road, she meets her 3 friends, the Scarecrow, which represents, the intellect, the ability to strategize. She meets the Tin Man, which represents the heart, the ability to love and to empathize. And then she meets the lion, the Cowardly Lion, who represents the ability to act, the ability to face fear. And those are the friends that she meets along the way to help her along this journey. In the story of Star Wars, Luke meets Obi-Wan Kenobi and is given this lightsaber, which is kind of the talisman of the Jedi, and it's the beginning of his very long journey into becoming a Jedi. He meets Chewbacca and Han Solo, and he acquires the services of these droids along the way. So these are all the special helpers that show up in the Star Wars saga. And then finally in Harry Potter, Hagrid comes in, and he's the first one to really introduce him to this world. And he goes on this, Harry Potter goes on this magical journey to Diagon Alley, where he gets his books, and he gets a pet owl named Hedwig, and he gets his wand. So that's pretty powerful. And along the way to Hogwarts, on the Hogwarts Express, he meets his 2 good friends, Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. So it's in this first act of the screenplay that the hero meets the friends that will be with him through most of this journey. And he also Harry also gets the invisibility cloak that plays a big role throughout the entire series. So the magic talismans come up, the knowledge, the psychological center, as Joseph Campbell would put it, is all in place there. And so the number 3 represents how the yin and the yang come together, where the 2 forces annihilate each other and create. 3 is very much about creation, the number 3. So you have the right path, the left path, the right path, the left path, and the middle path. So it's in mystery schools, it's represented as the third eye of Horus, where there's all kinds of creativity and sensitivity, and the ability to create something, comes into play. So we're going to go back to your headlines exercise now, and we're going to tie all of that in to your to your life. Okay, so also go back and think about, in your story that you have picked, what is that supernatural aid for your story, just like we did with Shadows and Origins. So for me, the number 3 that comes up is, let's see here, so we already did that. For me, the number 3 could be a couple of different ones, but I'm going to go with... I'm going to go with 2011, when I first started introducing this kind of work in the documentary film genre. So I created a lot of work, self-producing a lot of things, where I think my magic talisman is the 21st century hero's journey, is really understanding how to apply this motif to our worlds. I had a friend who was homeless, and she wanted to manifest $50,000 to help get her out of that situation. And I really wanted to prove that this kind of work, is really exponentially more powerful. So I said, well, why don't we try manifesting 500,000? How does that feel? Really scary, but really, it really feels like it stretches our boundaries, our belief systems. And long story short, she did attract 500,000 between the sale of a house and receiving a grant for publishing a book. And so that was kind of like the magic talisman for me, helping someone else to understand this psychological process in the way that it does manifest things. So, yeah, and that happened around that time where I was starting to introduce this kind of material in the, on camera and on the video and that kind of a thing. So go ahead and look at your headlines and find out, what is that supernatural aid in your story and also in the story that you have picked to examine on this journey here. So go ahead and pause the recording and go ahead and do that. And I'm going to introduce an improv exercise that I'd like to do in a group at some point in the future. I'm not going to do it here for this recording, but it's an exercise called Chain of Events, and we go back to the question, what do you want? So we really start to examine where we are at this point and where we want to be. So, for example, what I want is to produce, 3 classes, 3 experiences like this on camera. So I said, this is where I am. Where I want to be is to have 3 classes already created and done. So one of my friends, one of my partners in this exercise would stand on the other side of the room from me and represent the end. And so what happens after that is we play an improv where we take 3 other partners. So this might be a group of 5 or something like that. And the other 3 will start to put in the steps on how to get there, how they think the steps would go. So that could be anything, and it requires different minds to come into this and kind of synergize together to see what the possibilities are. So someone might step in and right before the end, before the person on the end, and say, you should do a class about how to create a presentation so that people can start to participate in a service and education market economy. It's like, okay, well, that will be my 3rd class. Then someone might come in right next to me at the beginning and say, well, first you have to introduce the most meaningful conversation so that people can start to have those productive conversations to even begin to think in that way. Okay, so that'll be my 1st class. So how do we bridge the gap between the most meaningful conversation and how to create your own presentation? The second person would go in right in the middle and said the bridge is the 21st century hero's journey. You've got to introduce the past and the future and how they come together now in the present so that people truly understand themselves. So that's an example of how the chain of events activity might work. So I'm kind of just describing it at the moment so that someday, we can get together in those kind of groups and we can practice that on its feet. So I just want to kind of plant that seed, and introduce it as part of the supernatural aid of the 21st century hero's journey. So great. So we talked about Act 1, and we did the primer, which was the headlines exercise. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to go into Act 2 and Act 3, as I've been going for a full hour now. But this is great. This is exciting. My voice is feeling a little hoarse, but it's also getting a little sexy, I think. Well, maybe not now. Now I sound like Batman. Yeah, 21st century hero's journey. You become Batman with a hoarse voice. All right, well, now I'm getting a little loopy and just playing around. But great, so I'm going to take a break. I'll be back, and we're going to start to go through Act 2. Again, please feel free to not do all of this in one sitting. It's a journey. It's epic. And feel free to take this, one step at a time. Take a day for each of these and really take the time to reflect and get to know yourself. Okay. Thank you for joining me, and I will be back soon with Act 2 of the 21st Century Hero's Journey.